Good morning from Moscow, everyone. It's Monday, the 8th of June. Coming up, the latest on the restrictions on the sale of petrol in parts of Russia. First, apologies for not posting last week. I was up in St. Petersburg at the International Economic Forum. Quite a dramatic week it was too. On the opening and the closing days of the forum, there were large-scale Ukrainian drone attacks on the St. Petersburg area. Mind you, when the ultra-pro-Kremlin Komsomolskaya Pravda asks participants, what will you remember about this forum, none of them mentions the drone attacks or the huge plume of thick black smoke over the city. No, what they will remember are the discussions about AI, the presentation of a new Russian aircraft engine, the PD-8. We talked a lot about Russian culture, and the upbeat governor of St. Petersburg concludes that for us, for people in St. Petersburg, the forum will be a catalyst for developing the city and attracting investment. Moskovsky Komsomolets today isn't so positive. It reports that capital investment in Russia fell by 14.3% year on year in the first quarter. The paper says that at the St. Petersburg Forum, business leaders talked about some of the problems, about expensive loans, about falling demand, about projects put on hold. One of Russia's biggest industrialists described the situation undiplomatically. The brakes are being put on investment. In metallurgy, demand for steel has been falling for the third year in a row. The market for investment goods is cooling. Business is revising plans. That's why participants called the cost of capital loans the main barrier to growth. Several of today's papers mention President Putin's rejection of President Zelensky's offer of direct talks and the Kremlin leader's message to Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine. Keep working, brothers. What does this mean for the prospects for peace in Ukraine? Moskovsky Komsomolets concludes, Russia's leader is counting on military force. And in Kiev, Zelensky is doing the same, convincing himself and others that he holds a lot of trump cards and a sack of unpleasant surprises for Russia. We can generally assume what's in this sack. The continuation and intensification of long-range strikes on the rear of our country, attempts to cause problems for overland transport links with Crimea, and to create the feeling of a blockade of the peninsula, attempts to destabilise the internal political situation in Russia and create an atmosphere of uncertainty, chaos, turmoil and fear. Nezavismaya Gazeta leads with petrol prices rise under drone strikes and tariff pressure. The fuel shortage in Crimea has become a reflection of the systemic problems of the domestic fuel market. Tension remains in Russia's domestic fuel market. In many regions there are restrictions on the sale of petrol. Logistical problems have yet to be resolved. Wholesale and retail prices for diesel and petrol are rising fast. Experts propose a long list of measures without which it will be difficult to protect the fuel and transport infrastructure in the rear of the country from attacks by Ukrainian drones. Now this is quite interesting. Belarusian oil refineries are helping to provide fuel to Russian consumers. In May 2026, the volume of petrol sales from Belarusian refineries reached 23,640 tonnes, which is 26 times higher than the same period last year. And today's edition of Kommersant has a related story on its front page. It reports that from the 24th of May to the 6th of June, the number of hotel bookings in Crimea decreased by 31% year on year. Sevastopol lost 40%. The number of cancellations on the peninsula has doubled. This is due to the fuel crisis that began in the region.